Today we're going to do a feature by feature, spec for spec review of the new Grizzly track saw. And that's not true at all, because I hate doing reviews like that. What I want to do is show you the saw, give you my initial impressions of it. It's going to be hard not to do a comparison to some of the other tools I've used in the past, primarily Festool's track saw. It's only natural because that's what I use just about every day. So I will give you some perspective on how the two systems interact with one another and which one I think is the better buy, which is kind of going to be a hard thing to do though, because this guy comes into the market at $230, which really, if you think about the track saw market, we haven't really seen much in that price range. The Makita, the DeWalt, the Festool, these are the ones that get the buzz, at least here in the US. All of those start at over $400. So this guy coming in at $230, it's going to catch people's attention. So what I want to do for you is let you know if even at $230, is it worth your investment? If it is, then this really opens up the concept of track saw cutting to a whole different market of people who couldn't justify spending the money on those other more expensive units. I don't think we're going to be able to say that this thing competes with the higher quality units or the more expensive units, just in terms of that feature by feature sort of setup and overall quality. Ultimately, Grizzly's not looking to do charity here. They're not just taking a hit on this and giving us a $500 saw for 230 bucks. They are probably going to have to use less quality parts. That's what it comes down to. We're not going to get everything with this, but what will we get? So what I want to do is show you some details on the saw itself. We'll take a close look, and then we'll actually go cut some wood, analyze the results, and then sum it all up. So let's get started. So let's put the saw on the track, and if you take a look at the outside, not really a whole lot going on this surface, but it is nice and flat, which means you can make those undercuts on the bottom of a door that's already hung. That's kind of a nice feature to have. You can see we've got a dust collection port. We'll try to fit it on various things that I've got in the shop, especially my Festool vacs. We'll see if that fits. This hole here is an access hole to adjust the riving knife. So if you push it down, you can see there's a riving knife behind the blade. This is a common feature of all these track saws, and it's a very nice safety feature, just as it is for the table saw. And you've got a little access hole here where you can make adjustments to that riving knife. And of course, when you plunge the saw, that's also how you make blade changes. All right, so let's look at the other side, because really this is where all the magic is happening. So of course here is a depth stop for the plunge mechanism. So this way, if you need to cut a 1/2 inch deep, 3/4, 1 inch, goes all the way to about 2.5 inches on the scale. You just lock it in place like this. Down here you have 2 adjustment knobs, and this is what adjusts the fit on the track so that you can get either a looser or tighter fit. And these are just plastic cam knobs that as you turn them, more of the plastic engages with the rail, and you just tighten it down with the included Allen wrench here. You've also, of course, got the ability to tilt the saw up to 45 degrees, and to do that you would loosen 2 of these knobs, 1 on each side, and then that allows you to make your adjustment and lock it in place. I honestly don't use that feature on any of these saws very often, but it's something that a lot of people, if you're making long bevel cuts, you might need. Let's look at the plunge mechanism. Now to plunge the saw, you've got this little safety release here, and it works via this thumb knob at the top of the handle. So you push that up, and now you can see it can go right into this channel. One thing I'm noticing right away, if you push it up too high, you actually make contact with the top of this channel. So I don't know if that's something that I can make an adjustment to. I don't really think I can, but it looks like if I push up too high, which is something I'm probably going to do, you push this thumb knob until it stops, you're going to make contact with that. Not a huge deal, but it's friction. Maybe that'll eventually wear down and it won't be an issue. The plunging mechanism itself feels fairly smooth. It's definitely a tighter spring. I can already tell you it's much tighter than something like the Festool. Because this handle here is practically vertical, you are starting in a little bit of an uncomfortable position here, and as you push your thumb in and push down, doing that one-handed is actually a lot more work than it is on the Festool, for instance. The spring here is what actually resists the motion of the plunge, and that just looks like a pretty heavy-duty spring, which explains why it's a little harder to push this guy down. Ultimately, we'll see if that's a factor in use. Now here's the guide rail. If you're familiar with guide rails, this does actually look quite similar to just about everything else out there. The saw itself rides on this inner track. You've got these little low-friction plastic strips here that just help the saw slide along smoothly. On the underside, we have these grippy strips. That's what I'm going to call them, grippy strips. And that actually helps it from slipping around. In fact, I rarely use clamps when I use these tracks, and this one looks like it's no exception. It has enough grip with the weight of the saw and the pressure I'm applying that I almost never feel the need to use a clamping system, although you probably should just to be safe. On the outside, you've got a splinter guard. It's a rubberized material that basically puts a little bit of pressure there right at the cut line, and that's what gives you that really super smooth cut. This is all consistent on just about every track saw guide that I've ever seen. You also have 2 slots on the underside, and that's for using things like clamps and other implements that maybe other accessories they might come up with, and it's just your fairly standard T-track. Now when I put the saw on it, you can see the saw itself has a groove here that goes onto the rail, lines up nicely, and you just push it along, and that's where these 2 cam action knobs come in handy to make sure that there's no slop. When you have it sitting on the track here, you want to rock it back and forth. And that's a tiny amount, that's a negligible amount that I'm hearing there. I wouldn't worry about that at all. So mine is already adjusted. And let's see. The motion is good. Normally I put wax on these. There's no wax on there right now, so it's probably the amount of friction I would expect. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned about, I don't know how it's really going to impact cutting, is the fact that there is some wobble here. Right, so I'm not sure what is the perfect vertical cut here. Is it putting pressure to the left, which I could kind of do this way, favoring this side, or is it when I put pressure on the blade side, which lifts this side up? Now initially you might think, what's the big deal? It's just a little bit of wobble. Well, frankly, that's a red flag to me, because part of the joy of using one of these saws is getting table saw quality cuts from the circular saw. If you're breaking down sheets of plywood, it's great to have a nice, clean table saw quality edge that you could then use if you do decide to go to the table saw. You don't have to make extra cuts after the fact. I'd like this to be a fine cutting tool if I can. So that amount of wobble is a little bit worrisome, because that is going to lead to vibration, and it's going to lead to the blade moving in and out of the workpiece, creating an edge that's not as good as it could be. So we'll see how much of a factor that truly is when we make the cut, but it's definitely something I'm keeping my eye on. So let's head over to my plywood cutting area, which I call the floor. Over there, and we'll cut some material. Before I make any cuts, I really want this to be a fair apples to apples comparison with what I'm already familiar with. So I will wax the track, lube it up a little bit, some Renaissance wax. A little bit goes a long way with this stuff. And I do wax pretty much the whole track here. It really does help to reduce a lot of friction. I'll wax the bottom of the track saw itself as well. So I am going to try and use this with my Festool dust extractor, and it looks like it's a pretty dead-on fit, so no problem there. So I'm just going to do a quick cross-cut. The reason I'm doing a cross-cut and not a rip is because I really want to see what this thing can do. How well does the blade perform? How good does that splinter guard work? The cross-cut is where we're going to see the most tear out, if it's going to happen. The rip cut is kind of the easy one. So we'll do a quick cross-cut. We'll analyze both the keeper piece and the off-cut and see what the results are. So first impressions after making a cut. Number one, the first thing I noticed was there was quite a bit of dust, significantly more dust than I typically get from something like the Festool track saw. But as I said earlier, I don't think that's the comparison we should make here. What we should be looking at is how much better is this than a traditional circular saw with maybe a homemade edge guide. And it is quite a bit better, because a lot of the dust went into the extractor, and what didn't go in there seems to be really localized to this off-cut piece. It didn't spew all over the shop like it typically does with a circular saw. So in that case, it's a vast improvement. The other thing I'm a little concerned about is that spring. Most of the time when I cut plywood, it just happens that at the end of the cut, I'm extended with one arm. That's the weakest position to be in terms of wrist strength, right? So as you're far out like this, it wants to fight you. It's a very strong spring, and it's pushing back at the extent of that cut. So that has me a little bit concerned. I can handle it. It's not like I'm not strong enough to hold it down, but there may be people who don't have strong wrists who can't handle it, and I wouldn't want to do that 10 times in a row. That would be very uncomfortable after a while. So with this particular unit, I would say even more than just the general safety reasons that you want to use two hands for comfort, you're probably going to want to use 2 hands throughout the cut. It's just, I mean, you know as well as I do, sometimes with 4x8 sheets of ply, if you're breaking them down, you end up in positions like this where your arm is all the way out and there's not a whole lot you could do about it. So let's take a close look at the cut quality, because that's really where the rubber meets the road here, or where the rubber strippy dealies meet the plywood. So here's my keeper piece, here's my offcut, and of course the keeper piece is the one we're most concerned with. If you can get an offcut that's nice and clean, that's great too, because then you have a nice clean finished edge to work with for the next cut, but it's not absolutely essential. The keeper piece is really where we're mostly concerned. Looking at the edge, there is tear out, a minor amount of tear out, all the way down the edge, top and bottom. Now, a minor amount of tear out to me is just not that big of a deal because I'm going to sand this surface anyway, and a little bit of sanding will take care of that. It's when the tear out gets a little bit more substantial. I've got a couple of spots where it's gone back a little bit further from the edge. That type of tear out is going to be very visible in the final piece, especially if this is something that gets edge banded. The joint between the edge banding and the plywood, a little divot like that is going to be a problem. If you're just putting this into a dado and this is like a structural piece, it's not going to be a big deal. You're never going to see something like that. But overall, not a terrible result, not bad at all. And especially when you compare this to what a circular saw, traditional circular saw does, even with a decent blade, a lot of times the result is going to be a lot worse than this. All right, so the offcut did not fare as well. There's quite a bit of tear out all the way down, and I've also got tear out that ranges back about 1/4 of an inch from the edge, which means when I clean this one up with another pass, making this my keeper piece, I'd have to come back a whole 1/4 inch to get past that tear out. Still fairly serviceable, but not quite as perfect as I might hope with a track saw. Ultimately though, compared to a traditional circular saw, this cut is very clean and very straight. And I think that's really what they were setting out to do in the first place. Now, because a lot of these track saw systems look so similar, in fact, some of them just seem to be carbon copies of one another, it's natural that everyone wants to know, can they work together? Can I use, let's say, a Festool TS55 with a Grizzly track and vice versa? Also clamps and things like that, will they work? So let's test it out and see. I actually don't know. We'll find out together. So first, let's take the Festool saw and drop it on the Grizzly rail. I'm going to make sure that my cams are fully open so that those aren't in the way. And it sort of drops onto the rail to an extent, but it is not going down all the way. It's certainly not going to move on this thing either, so it's definitely too tight. If you look at the Festool track here, not only do you have these green cams that are going to fine-tune your fit, you've also got the other side of the track, which has these little metal tabs. And those are actually what's blocking it from going down all the way. So that's a no-go. Even if you could, like let's say you were super motivated and a little crazy and you decide to file these down, maybe that would make room for it to drop on. You have to be concerned about where the blade is going to contact this outside edge here. So let's take a look at that. Just plunge down a little bit. You can see we're making contact with the aluminum rail. So if you were so motivated to use the Grizzly track with the Festool saw, it's going to be a destructive process. You're going to have to do a modification to the saw itself, which will most likely void its warranty, and you will do some modification to the track by cutting it. So I don't know that that's necessarily a great way to go. So hopefully that answers that question. Let's also, just for kicks, see if the Grizzly saw fits on the Festool track. That seems to be okay. Got a little bit of wobble here, but I would bet that if I loosen up the cam knobs, well, look at that. That actually does work. But remember, we had a blade placement problem. If the Festool was cutting into the track, when you put the Grizzly on the Festool track, what's going to happen? The blade is going to be out away from the splinter guard. And in fact, I think that's beyond the capacity of most of these splinter guards. So even if you put a new one on there, I'm not sure that you're going to get it to go out far enough that it's going to work properly for this. I don't know who would want to go this direction using the Grizzly saw with the Festool track, but if you wanted to, technically it kind of works. You're just not going to get the benefit of that splinter guard. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any of the Grizzly accessories to test out, like clamps and things like that, but I do have Festool clamps, and we'll see if those fit into the Grizzly track. It's a pretty standard T-track. So that's not really any surprise, that does work. And this is one of the little clamping dealy whackers. And that seems to work just fine. So yeah, the Festool stuff does work with the Grizzly track. And based on what I see here, I gotta think, and this is just sort of an educated guess, that the Grizzly accessories will also work with the Festool track. The dimensions of these T-slots just aren't that different. So let's sum this whole thing up. Really it comes down to, are you a glass half full or a glass half empty kind of person? If you're a half empty kind of person, you're going to compare it to the Festool, the DeWalt, the Makita, and you're going to see that it falls short in a number of areas. Number one, dust collection. Number two, the cut quality. It's a little bit more of a frayed cut than we get with those other units. Number three, the wobbling. Right? That's kind of a concern for me. I'm not really happy that it has that, and I'm concerned about what long-term, what that's going to mean. I'd have to use it a lot more to tell you for sure if it has a major impact, but it does have me a little bit concerned. The other thing is the plunge mechanism. I mentioned it a couple times already. I just feel like it's too strong of a spring. I think it needs to be a little bit more loose. It's not that comfortable to use it. So that's glass half empty, but if you're looking at the glass half full perspective, we're going to compare this to other circular saws on the market. Well, first of all, you got a much more controlled cut because now we have a track that we can use. Even if you build your own guide, a lot of times you have to keep the saw pushed up against that guide throughout the entire cut, otherwise you tend to drift away. With this, it's a true track, and it's holding it in a position so that all you have to do is push the saw forward. You don't have to worry about it sort of meandering away from your cut line. That's a great thing. Cut quality. This guy right out of the box cuts with higher quality than any other circular saw, standard circular saw that I've used in the past. It certainly cuts better than my Porter cable, which has an upgraded Freud blade on it that's meant for plywood. So definitely kudos in that regard. Dust collection. Dust collection is going to be great compared to a regular circular saw where the dust is just all over the place and then going into your lungs. This will collect a good portion of it, and it seems like it does a fair job of directing the sawdust into a place where it's not going up into the air, which is quite a bit of an advantage. So really, that's what it comes down to, is what are you looking for out of this saw? If you just want to break the plywood down into smaller pieces for further processing, something like this is going to be great. Using the stock blade that comes with it, with this particular setup, there may be other blades that might improve the cut quality, but as is, I don't consider the cut quality finish quality. I would want to take those pieces and take them over to the table saw and cut them again so I can get a nice crisp, clean edge with no tear out. So if you're looking to get finish quality cuts, which I certainly depend on my Festool saw to do, you're not going to get it necessarily from what comes out of the box. Maybe people have different standards, I don't know. Maybe for someone it might be finished quality. For me and my work, what I consider to be fine furniture, I don't think it's finished quality. So there is that to be concerned about. But if all you're looking to do is have something that guides a decent quality circular saw without wavering, and you want to be able to break down sheets of plywood on the ground like I do using something like this, this will get you there. And it's going to get you there for $230 as of April 2013. So we'll see where the pricing goes. But it is not a Festool track saw. It is not a DeWalt or a Makita. It is what it is. It's in a whole different class, and it is intended to accomplish a different goal and sort of satisfy a different market. I don't think this saw is really going to take any customers away from Festool. I think what it's going to do is make a lot more people aware of what a track saw in general can do and what the advantages are. And hopefully more people will own them and will know the joys of being able to just drop one of these onto a line, cut it, and go, which is pretty cool. So I'll probably be giving this unit away in the future. I don't really have a need of it, but I think this would make a great giveaway. So we'll have to work on that. Maybe we'll do a giveaway with this video. Okay, so thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you have some track saws in your future because they are great to own. I highly recommend them regardless of who you go with, and we'll catch you next time. And I just realized it would be really dumb not to give the saw away with this particular video, so how about we do that? Go to thewoodwhisperer.com, find this video, and you'll see a form embedded in the post where you just fill out your name and email, and you are in the running to win this saw. Now we ask that you only fill your name and email out one time. You could do it multiple times. The form will let you do it 100 times. But I have to warn you, we have a rule in the Spagnolo household after doing this for a number of years. If people don't follow instructions, especially if they submit their form like 10 times, 20 times, we just delete them all. I don't know if that's legal. I don't know if it's even morally right. but sometimes it feels really good. So I urge you, please fill it out one time, and you'll be entered to win a pretty cool saw for free. The other thing is we do ship international. Everybody always wants to know, do we ship outside of the US? Absolutely. For a giveaway that we're in charge of, we never keep it localized to the US or even North America. We ship anywhere. So go to thewoodwhisperer.com, fill out that form, and I hope you win. I actually do. I thought about it. I really hope you win. Good luck.